The toy box was the name that serial killer David Parker Ray gave to his mobile home turned torture chamber where he allegedly killed up to 60 women. Ray spent an estimated $100,000 in order to create a dungeon filled with adult toys and torture devices, like whips, chains, saws, and surgical blades, so that he can drug, sexually torture, and kill his victims. Ray was born in 1939 in New Mexico and came from an abusive family. He was described as a subpar student who was unusually shy around girls, and he was bullied at school. It is estimated that he kidnapped women, mostly immigrants and prostitutes, for nearly 40 years. Ray was finally caught when his last victim, Cynthia Vigil, endured 3 days of torture and rape by him and his accomplice. In 1999, Ray and his girlfriend, Cindy Lee Hindi, solicited Cynthia Vigil for sex. Once they got her in the truck, they immediately handcuffed, then bound and gagged her. Upon their arrival at the toy box, they tied Cindy to a pole and began to play a 20-minute-long video of Ray explaining what he planned to do to her. The following is the actual audio. If you want to skip it, go to the next timestamp.
Hello there, bitch. You probably think you're going to be raped, and you're fucking sure right about that. You're not going to remember a fucking thing about this little adventure. As far as I'm concerned, you're a pretty piece of meat. Be smart and be a survivor. Have a nice day.
For 3 horrifying days, Ray and Hindi electrocuted, beat, and assaulted Cindy while telling her that things would only get worse. On day 3, Ray went to work and left Hindi in charge of watching Cindy. When Hindi went into another room, Cindy found slack in her chains and managed to free herself with keys left on the table next to her. She found a phone, and when she tried to call the police, Hindi came up from behind her and hit her on the head with a lamp. A fight ensued, and Cindy managed to stab Hindi in the neck with an ice pick. She was covered in blood and was naked with the exception of a slave collar and chains as she ran down the road trying to find someone to help her. At least 2 cars passed by as she screamed for help. She found a trailer park and saw a motorhome with the lights on and opened the door. She ran inside and slammed the door behind her, much to the surprise of the homeowner. After Ray and Hindi were arrested, police investigated the trailer, and what they found was the stuff of nightmares. The trailer was fitted with a gynecological examination table and a homemade device that generated electricity to torture victims. There were also diagrams of how to torture written by Ray, personal journals, and videotapes of victims being assaulted. There were a few women he'd actually let go. However, they were so drugged they couldn't be sure if their fractured memories were even real. The women that he tortured to death were thrown into a local lake by Ray and one of his many accomplices. Shockingly enough, one of his accomplices was his own daughter, Glenda Ray, who, along with Ray's friend, Dennis Yancey, would help David Parker Ray kidnap women. Although there was evidence that he kidnapped many women, he could never be pinned for the actual murders since none of the bodies were found. He was still convicted for the kidnapping and torture of Cynthia Vigil and 2 other women that came forward. In 2002, he was sentenced to 223 years in prison, but died of a heart attack that same year. When the Philadelphia police received a call from a panicked Josephine Rivera on March 24, 1987, she told them a story so horrifying that it would later go on to inspire the movie Silence of the Lambs. Josephine told them of how she just escaped the dungeon of a man named Gary Heidnik, who kept her and 3 women captive in his basement since the previous November. She told the police of how he sexually assaulted and tortured them, and that he killed 2 women who were held with her. And in one instance, the survivors were forced to eat one of the murdered. When the police went to Heidnik's home, they discovered that every grisly detail was true. Gary M. Heidnik was born in 1943 in Cleveland, Ohio, and as a child, he refused to make eye contact with anyone and didn't interact with his peers. Heidnik was also bullied about his oddly shaped head that his brother claimed was the result from falling out of a tree. Despite having an IQ of 130, he would suffer from a lifelong bedwetting problem. Heidnik served in the army for over a year before being honorably discharged after being diagnosed with schizoid personality disorder. He moved from job to job after his discharge, becoming a licensed practical nurse. He was fired from his job as a psychiatric nurse after abusing several mentally disabled patients. Next, he became a self-ordained minister in a tiny church called United Church of the Ministers of God. He would later make a small fortune after several investments. When he married Betty Ditso in 1985, his behavior grew increasingly worse. He would often beat and force himself on his wife, and would also force her to watch him have sex with other women. She divorced him in 1986. As his mental state worsened, he got it into his head that he needed to have as many children as possible, and in order to do that, he would need a harem. In November of 1986, Heidnik would pick up his first victim, Josephine Rivera. After a fight with her boyfriend on a cold winter night, she went off to work the streets and met Gary Heidnik. He convinced her to go to his house, and as soon as she walked inside, he started choking her. He handcuffed her, dragged her down into his dank basement, and tossed her onto a dirty mattress, then shackled her ankles to a pipe. He would regularly sexually assault and beat her. Sometimes, he would put her in a shallow hole that was only deep enough for her to lie in, cover it with a wooden board that had a breathing hole, and place weights on top so she couldn't escape. When she screamed from the hole, he would crank up heavy metal music so that the neighbors couldn't hear her. Over several months, Heidnik lured women into his home, and by the time he was caught, he kidnapped 6 women and killed 2. The first woman he murdered was Sandra Lindsay. She died when Heidnik punished her for moving the board that was covering the pit. Her punishment was being hung from a ceiling beam, and when he thought she was pregnant, he force-fed her. As a result, Sandra ran a high fever and fell unconscious. Heidnik said that she was faking and put her back in the pit. The next morning, Sandra was dead, and he dragged her body up the stairs. The terrified women then heard the sounds of a power saw. For dinner that night, he fed his dogs and the remaining women dog food. Police would later discover that the dog food was actually the remains of Sandra. Heidnik used a food processor to grind up her body. The second murder victim was Deborah Dudley. Heidnik regularly beat her, trying to break her spirit, but she always fought back. To prove that he was serious, he showed Deborah a pot of boiling water containing Sandra's head. Because Heidnik started to trust Josephine, he would include her in Deborah's torture. Josephine would later testify that she was in fear for her life, and so she did what she was told. Deborah was killed after he filled the pit halfway with water, forced Deborah inside with a board on top, and placed a live wire in the hole, electrocuting her. On March 25, 1987, the police smashed the door down to the Philadelphia home and quickly arrested Heidnik. Inside, there were 2 starved women on dirty mattresses, chained to a pipe, while a third was lying in the pit. As the police searched the home, they found a rib cage in the oven and several pounds of human meat in the fridge that included a woman's knee, thighs, and arms. Heidnik was convicted of kidnapping, rape, and 2 counts of murder. He was sentenced to death and was executed on July 6, 1999. This section will be a little different because there's a lot more speculation about this killer and his dungeon than facts. This case was even considered a state secret until a journalist broke the news on Weibo, China's version of Twitter. We tried our best with the pronunciation of the names. Please bear with us. What's behind this grated door leads to the torture chamber of 6 women and the grave for 2. They were forcibly trafficked, beaten, and tortured in a dungeon created by a 34-year-old Chinese civil servant named Li Hao. These crimes will only be revealed when his last victim escaped. In September 2011, a 23-year-old woman named Ma Mao Mao, this is the pseudonym that the police gave her, in Henan province escaped a hidden basement in a residential building. When she reached the police, she told her horrifying story. In July 2011, she was working as a hostess at a karaoke bar, and she was lured to the basement belonging to Li Hao. There, she was imprisoned with 3 other women. Alarmed by the victim's statement, the police went to Li Hao's apartment. What they found was an unremarkable ground floor apartment that was small and dirty. The surprise was the hole in the ground that led to Li Hao's dungeon. The dungeon can only be entered through the hole with a ladder that went down 3.4 meters or 11 feet. The hole also had a long plastic tube running through it that pumped fresh oxygen into the basement. Once a person finished climbing down, they had to crawl through a 4.7 meters or 15.5 foot long tunnel that was only wide enough for one person to go through at a time. Throughout the tunnel were 7 locked interspaced iron gates. After going through all of the gates, there was a larger dungeon that was sectioned off into 2 rooms. As you can see in these photos, Li built living quarters where the victims could spend their day and a back room where the women slept. In the beginning, Li brought takeout every day for them to eat, but it became expensive, so he gave them pots and pans so they could cook for themselves. There was no running water or plumbing, and so the women had to use the bathroom in the corner of the rooms. In these photos, you can see the books that he gave the victims to occupy their time. That back room was also where he sexually assaulted his victims. So who was Li Hao, and how could he build this dungeon? According to the official reports, Li Hao worked as a firefighter before being transferred to work at the Law Enforcement Brigade of Liyang Quality and Technical Supervision Bureau as a code enforcer and was generally well liked. He was married with a son, and from all reports, he got along well with his wife and was a loving husband and father. However, one of the things me and my sister noticed while we were researching Li Hao was that there wasn't much information about him after he was caught. Even his birth year has been kept a secret. These photos are the only known photos of him available. One is of Li Hao after he was arrested, and the other was before his execution. Also, there are no videos or pictures from his trial. And this is different from other Chinese serial killers, such as Gao Chenyoung, where there were plenty of videos of his arrest and trial. If you want to learn more about the Chinese Jack the Ripper, go to our video after watching this one. Due to the lack of photos, we use Baidu.com or Chinese Google to find more photos and videos of Li Hao, but instead, we found a blog on a website called Zihu.com. Using Bing's translator, we found this comment that claims something interesting about Li Hao's family background that wasn't made public. Quote, Li Hao's family background is second to none in Liyang. His father was a big leader. He has 2 older brothers, one in Liyang's political and legal committee, and one is a county leader. And his uncle in Liyang is on the political and legal commission and held an important position. It is also speculated that Li Hao joined the military and changed his name before joining. Then he became a firefighter. There is no way to verify this information, and it is only speculation. What is known about Li Hao is that he bought the residential building in 2008 in his wife's name without her knowledge in order to hide his tracks. According to Li, he worked on his dungeon constantly, and to avoid suspicion, Li started digging at night and used nylon bags to transport the dirt away in the early mornings on his motorcycle, and he would spend his nights in the apartment. Li's wife had no idea what her husband was up to. He would get home late at night or not at all. When she questioned where he was going, he told her that he got another job that was overnight and had rented an apartment to sleep in. In 2009, he set his nefarious plans of having a harem of his own in motion. Li Hao trolled karaoke bars, beauty salons, and massage parlors to find women to kidnap. In October 2009, he kidnapped his first victim, Shang Xuan. By 2010, he kidnapped 3 more women. He would regularly force himself on his victims and beat them into compliance in what he called training. He also forced his victims into adult video chats. And to make sure that none of the women called for help, Li Hao stayed in the room just out of view. He charged 50 yuan, or about $8, per 30 minutes. But when this wasn't as lucrative as he thought, he took the more obedient victims out into the public so that he can prostitute them. Li made the women call him Big Brother and referred to the women as his little sisters. He manipulated the women to the point that some of them became jealous and would fight over who could sleep with Big Brother that night. The women were so brainwashed that even after they were rescued, a victim tried to defend Li by saying he treated them well. In July 2010, Shang Xuanchuan became defiant. She refused to listen to Li and attacked him from behind to escape. But Li managed to wrestle her to a wall, then handcuffed her. He then told Duan Mao Mao, the second captive he kidnapped in the same year as Zhang, that if she helped him kill Zhang, he would give Duan her freedom. And so, Duan helped Li strangle Zhang to death. Zhang was buried near the remaining victim's bed as a scare tactic to keep the rest of the women in line. In May 2011, 16-year-old Kai Mao Mao was found to have an STD and she was unable to perform in the adult chat. Li decided that Kai was useless, and so he hatched a plan to kill her. He told the 4 other women his plan, and so they got together and attacked Kai. For weeks she was tortured and starved, and her days were filled with agony. Li was so cruel that he made the teenager eat human waste. In July 2011, Li and Duan beat Kai again, but this time she didn't survive. Kai died and her body was hidden in a concrete pool. After killing 2 of his victims, Li decided that he needed another woman for his harem. And so, he kidnapped 23-year-old Ma Mao Mao. We don't know if Li Hao was desperate for money or if Ma Mao Mao convinced him that she could be trusted, but we do know that he took her out of the dungeon and after 2 months of captivity to prostitute her. It was early in September 2011 where she got her chance to escape and tell authorities what happened. The manhunt for Li lasted for 48 hours before he was found trying to leave the city with his wife and child. After the investigation concluded, local government officials became nervous about the case. It was one of their own civil servants that committed a horrible crime, and the revelation will put their government in a bad light. And so, the case was originally sealed as a state secret. It wasn't until September 22, 2011, when a freelance reporter named Ji Xiaoguang broke the story on Weibo, China's Twitter alternative. Originally, Ji was investigating the death of a local reporter when he got the tip about Li Hao's sex dungeon. Li's case was kept hush-hush with only high-ranking authorities and the task force working on the case that knew anything about it. The same day that he reported the story, 2 men claiming to be from the government came to the hotel Ji was staying at to demand to know who gave him the information about Li Hao. Ji said, "They told me that by reporting the case, I had committed the crime of revealing a state secret," Ji told the Qingdao-based City Sun newspaper. "I don't understand what kind of state secret I have betrayed in the slave story." Chinese citizens were outraged that the local government tried to hide something so horrendous and accused the police of a massive cover-up. The outrage caught the attention of other news organizations, and the Luoyang local government was pressured to unseal the case. On November 30th, 2012, the Intermediate People's Court of Luoyang convicted Li Hao on intentional murder, rape, organized prostitution, illegal detention, and the production and dissemination of obscene materials for profit, and was executed on January 21st, 2014. Curiously, 3 of the 4 victims were also convicted of intentional homicide. This included Duan Mao Mao. Even though they were coerced by Li Hao, Duan Mao Mao was sentenced to 3 years since she helped Li Hao kill 2 women, and the other 2 victims received suspended sentences for assisting in killing Cao Mao Mao. Although this case is closed, it still leaves many unanswered questions, with the main one being, how could Li Hao build such an elaborate dungeon alone? Remember, the dungeon wasn't just a hole in a wall. It was an 11-foot vertical shaft that led down into a horizontal shaft that was 15 foot long, which led to a room that was 215 square feet, according to the New York Times. Also, he installed 7 gates, laid bricks, painted the dungeon, and installed electricity by himself, all within a year. And according to his confession, he disposed of tons of dirt and rock in nylon bags that he carried on his motorcycle, apparently without any of his neighbors seeing or hearing anything. In our research, we found a Chinese blog that made calculations using a computer simulation based on the released photos that determined that the dungeon was structurally sound. In fact, as far as we can tell, that building is still in use. This again begs the question, how could Li Hao, without an engineering background, do all of this work alone and in a year? These facts led some Chinese netizens to believe that the dungeon was there before Lee moved in, or that he had help from other people. Some commenters also noted how suspiciously the case was handled. One commenter wondered, "The case is contradictory according to the police description, not to mention whether a person can dig out such a large hole, install 7 iron doors, lay bricks, paint it, and add electricity in more than a year." Some even think he was a Jeffrey Epstein of the East and that Li Hao was part of a conspiracy to traffic women. Even as we worked on the script, some of the Chinese sources we used are now gone and have 404 errors. Oakland Raiders player Anthony Wayne Smith had it all: money, talent, fame, and was once married to Prince's protege, Vanity. But as his star dwindled, he started a life of crime that would end with 4 dead and a firebombing. Born in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, Anthony Smith was known as a charismatic and extremely athletic student. He played for the Raiders for 6 years, and during that time, he married singer Vanity, but their marriage only lasted a year. And according to Vanity, Smith was physically abusive. He cultivated an image of someone that wanted to help the community.
You can't change the world, but you can change the life of one kid. Become a mentor at the Los Angeles City Housing Project.
But after his successful time with the Raiders and a year with the Broncos, he abruptly retired at 31 years old and began his life of crime. For reasons unknown, Smith began hanging out with gang members and started illegal side businesses. In 1999, his first business was an online medical billing company that ended up being investigated by the FTC. But his billing scams soon devolved into murder. Ricky and Kevin Nettles were successful businessmen. The brothers owned an auto repair shop, a barber shop, and a cell phone and beeper store. On November 10, 1999, Kevin was with a friend watching the Lakers game in his auto shop. Suddenly, a tall man wearing a green police jacket and a badge walked into the office with his gun drawn. The man would be later identified as Anthony Smith. He ordered Kevin to step outside just as his brother Ricky was closing their barbershop across the street. Ricky and an employee ran to see what was going on, and another man in a dark suit and badge walked up to Ricky and said that the brothers were being taken in for questioning. The pair were forced into the back of a car, and that was the last time anyone would see them alive. The next day, Ricky's body was found on a street in Compton, California, and Kevin's body was found 8 miles away. Both men were tortured by being burnt multiple times with U-shaped and triangle-shaped brands were on their torsos and faces. Their heads were wrapped in duct tape, and they were stabbed repeatedly. When the police went to investigate, they found that Ricky's apartment was ransacked. For years, the Nettles murders went unsolved, and Anthony Smith felt untouchable. But one of the things he hated the most was when he felt like people were taking advantage of him or owed him money. In March 2003, the consignment furniture store Simply Sofa was firebombed. When detectives spoke to the owner, Marilyn Nelson, she revealed that she had an argument with Smith 2 weeks before. The dispute started when Smith had Simply Sofa to sell his furniture. When he returned to collect his check and unsold furniture, he claimed that his items were damaged. Marilyn told him that the items arrived that way, but Smith got angry and demanded that he be compensated for the damage, and the pair began to argue. Anthony Smith was 6'3" and over 300 pounds, and Marilyn decided this wasn't a fight she was willing to continue. So, she wrote him a check for $615 for the damaged furniture. The next day, he came back claiming that he lost the check and demanded that she write him another one. Not wanting to get into another confrontation, she did. But when the bank called about a second check being cashed for the same amount by Anthony Smith, her daughter told the bank not to cash the check. 2 weeks later, Simply Sofa was torched. Anthony Smith was suspected immediately, and the police even found remnants of paperwork with Smith and his wife's name on it wrapped around what was left of the firebomb. But even though he was arrested and charged for arson, there wasn't enough evidence to convict him. During the trial, he was charismatic and by all accounts was a great witness. His supporters included members of his church who were convinced that he did nothing wrong, and gang members wearing Raider jackets at his trial. The trial deadlocked and Smith was free. Smith had evaded prison, but he wasn't done yet. On October 7, 2008, 30-year-old Maurilio Ponce was found dead on a deserted road, and there were signs of torture. He had a black eye and dozens of shallow cuts and large bruises along his back. Maurilio was made to kneel and killed execution style. He was shot twice in the back of the head and 8 times in the torso. The police knew that Anthony Smith, along with 2 other men, were somehow involved because of the multiple calls that were made to and from Smith the night that Maurilio disappeared. They also tracked Smith's cell phone, and it was proven that he was in the area where Maurilio was found. When the police searched Smith's condo, they found Maurilio's car and another stolen car in Smith's allotted spots. They also found rubber gloves, rope that had been cut, police-style zip ties, a pellet gun, and a book called Make 'em Pay: Ultimate Revenge Techniques from the Master Trickster in the trunk of the second car. Smith also had several baseball caps with the words Bail Enforcement and Fugitive Recovery Agent. When asked why he had Maurilio's car and the keys, he claimed that Maurilio told him that he was late on his car payment and wanted it chopped up so he could claim that it was stolen to his insurance company. Smith also claimed that he and Maurilio dealt in stolen freight. This time, his claims of innocence didn't work. In March 2011, Anthony Smith was put on trial for the murder of Maurilio Ponce. By the time it came to deliberation in April, the jury was deadlocked, but they favored the guilty verdict. But while Smith waited for a retrial, he became connected to the Nettles brothers' murders because he was a suspect in another murder. In 2001, Dennis Henderson was found dead in the back of his car. He had been stomped to death. His cheekbone was fractured, he had a dislocated jaw, and he had been stabbed in his left eye, his ear, and 11 times in the back. Dennis's brother Barry told the police that Anthony had to be his brother's murderer due to the pair having a falling out about money. During the investigation, Barry told the police something interesting. At one point, the Henderson brothers were friends with Anthony Smith, and Smith once bragged about how he kidnapped and killed 2 brothers. Police looked into the claim and learned about the Nettles brothers' murder case. With enough evidence connecting him to the additional murders, he was charged with 3 more counts of murder in July 2011. On November 5, 2015, he was convicted of the murders of the Nettle brothers and Dennis Henderson. On January 22, 2016, Smith was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. As of the making of this video, Anthony Smith is 54 years old and is currently serving his sentence in a California prison. It was the summer of 1995 when 8-year-olds Melissa Rousseau and Julie Lejeune were kidnapped by prolific predator Marc Dutroux. They were locked inside of the homemade dungeon and starved to death. Their fates wouldn't be discovered until the shocking rescue of 2 of his teen victims from his torture chamber a year later. Born in Ixelles, Belgium on November 6, 1956, Marc Dutroux's own mother described her son as having a twisted heart. From all accounts, his childhood was normal, but at the age of 16, he ran away from home and became a male prostitute. This was just the start of Dutroux's criminal career, and he would be in and out of jail for most of his adult life, for car thefts, muggings, and drug dealing. He married his first wife at the age of 20, and they had 2 children, but divorced in 1983. His first marriage was tumultuous and filled with abuse and infidelity. Eventually, he would go on to marry his mistress, Michelle Martin, in 1989. By 1985, his crimes escalated dramatically. He and 2 accomplices kidnapped and sexually assaulted 5 young girls in 1985 and 1986. The 3 men were caught because one of the culprits talked about himself freely to his victims, so the police were able to identify him. In 1989, Dutroux was convicted and sentenced to 13.5 years in prison. Dutroux's own mother didn't believe that he was rehabilitated and feared that he would strike again. She even wrote to the prison board begging to keep her son behind bars, but her letter was ignored. Despite his horrific crimes, he only served 3 years in prison and was released early for good behavior in 1992. Dutroux was a free man, and between 1992 and 1995, he was able to purchase 7 houses. His known income at the time was 1,200 francs a month in government assistance. It has never been revealed where he got his money to buy the houses. In his main residence in Charleroi, he constructed a concealed dungeon in his basement. He was a trained electrician, so he was able to do all the wiring himself. But the dungeon itself appears to be too complicated for just one out-of-work electrician. The stairs to get into the basement were old with plaster peeling off. The basement itself was unfinished, grimy, and dirty. The only section of the basement that looks like it had any work done was the wall with the metal shelf. But that shelf was actually a heavy concrete secret door. When pulled, it slides out and up, revealing a cell that was only 7 feet long by 3 feet wide and 5 feet tall. In this picture, you can see that the cell is behind a secret concrete door. It was a chamber of horrors painted in bright, friendly yellow. In this picture, you can see just how small the dungeon was. There are 2 shelf brackets against the north wall and wiring along the ceiling. Near the cell door is a tall green shelf that takes up a corner of the cell. When inside looking out, you can tell how truly claustrophobic the cell was. The cell door is more complicated than one would think, and instead of hinges, it uses a complicated series of rollers. On June 24, 1995, 8-year-old best friends Julie Lejeune and Melissa Rousseau were kidnapped as they walked around their neighborhood. For 3 months, the 2 girls were kept in Dutroux's basement, where he sexually assaulted them while recording the heinous acts. 2 months later, on August 22nd, Dutroux and an accomplice kidnapped 17-year-old Anne Marchal and 18-year-old Effia Lambrox in Ostend while on a camping trip. Because the cell was occupied with Julie and Melissa, he kept Anne and Effia in another room. The room appeared unassuming enough, painted all white with colorful stickers on the door. In the room, Effia and Anne were chained to bunk beds. We don't know the sequence of events, but we do know that both girls were tortured, sexually assaulted, and buried alive. It is likely that Dutroux kept the teenagers in his home for a few weeks before ultimately killing them. On December 6, Dutroux was arrested for stealing luxury cars and remained in jail until March 20, 1996. During that time, none of Dutroux's accomplices fed the 8-year-olds Julie or Melissa. Dutroux's wife, Michelle Martin, a former primary school teacher and the mother of 3 of his children, knew the girls were there and went to the house regularly to feed the dogs, but she would never feed the girls. When the authorities later asked why she didn't feed them, she said that she was too afraid to feed the, quote, little beasts because she thought they might attack her. Throughout 1995, Dutroux's mother wrote letters telling police that her son was kidnapping little girls and keeping them in one of his houses. And she wasn't alone. There were other reports to the Belgian police about the strange things going on at the home. One tip even told police that Dutroux had built a dungeon in his basement. Eventually, the police searched his home twice on December 13th and the 19th in 1995. In one of the searches, 2 police officers went into the basement with a locksmith. The locksmith said that he heard faint screaming. The police dismissed him and said that the screams must have come from outside. They also collected videotapes, but no one from the investigation bothered to watch any of them until much later. It was revealed that one of the videos was a tour of the dungeons as it was being built. When Dutroux was released, it only took 2 months for him to start kidnapping again. On May 28, 1996, 12-year-old Sabine Dardenne was kidnapped and caned on her way to school by Dutroux and one of his accomplices, Michael Leveret. Dutroux constantly lied to the 12-year-old that if she wrote letters, he would send them to her parents. He read the letters and would use what he learned to manipulate Sabine. Then, on August 9, 1996, the pair kidnapped 14-year-old Letitia Delhay. The pair were hidden away inside the dungeon. Like Julie and Melissa, Sabine and Letitia were assaulted, and those assaults were also recorded. But this time, investigators found a witness that remembered part of the license plate that matched Dutroux. On August 13, 1996, Belgian police did a synchronized raid on all 7 of his homes. Dutroux, his wife, and his accomplice were arrested. A search of the houses didn't reveal any crimes, but 2 days later, both Dutroux and Liliev confessed. Dutroux led the investigators to the still-living Sabine and Letitia, as well as the bodies of Anne, Effia, Julie, and Melissa. The police also found the body of Dutroux's first accomplice, Bernard Weinstein. He had been drugged and buried alive. Dutroux claims that it was because Weinstein failed to feed Julie and Melissa. Once the news of Dutroux's crimes were released to the public, there was widespread public outcry and frustration due to how the investigation was bungled several times by Belgian police. When Efya and An's parents reported them missing, the police dismissed both sets of parents and said that the girls probably went out partying, and one of the officers even implied that maybe Efya was on drugs. The police wouldn't start looking for the teenagers until a few days later due to the parents' insistence. While we can't get into every detail, there are two other notable instances of the Belgian police's failures. During a high point of the investigation, a magistrate working on Julie's and Melissa's case forgot to tell her replacement that children were missing. Another instance of incompetence is that the police ignored a tip from an informant that Dutroux offered him between $3,000 and $5,000 to kidnap young girls. Protests broke out when a popular judge was dismissed from the case after he was seen at a victim's benefit event. One protest had over 300,000 people attend, demanding criminal reform. Dutroux insisted that he was in a Europe-wide pedophile ring with connections to high-ranking and wealthy clientele. There were several arrests made with those connected to the ring. However, Belgian police stated that the ring did not reach as far as Dutroux claimed that it did. But it has been speculated that it was the only way that an ex-con that was still getting 1,200 francs a month in state welfare was able to purchase 7 houses. After 8 years, Dutroux was finally put on trial on June 4, 2004, and on June 22, 2004, Dutroux received the maximum sentence of life in prison. His wife received 30 years but was released in August 2012, and his accomplice received 25 years. Born on November 10, 1964 in Qingchang, Gao Chenyoung was the youngest of 8 and was known to be a quiet and introverted child. He was so unassuming that his neighbors barely remembered anything about him. His family saw him as an obedient son that took care of his dying father. Though he graduated high school, he repeatedly failed to get into any university, his only way to upward mobility. In China, the practice of Haokao, or household registration, restricted people from moving too far from their hometown. By the time he married his wife Zhang in 1984, Haokao had been relaxed. He and his wife decided to move to Baiyin in the Gansu province in 1986 after his father died. In a new city where no one knew him, Gao Chenyoung proved to be a ticking, murderous time bomb. Gao Chenyoung's reign of terror started off as a robbery. On May 26, 1988, the 23-year-old was riding his bike through the city looking for a house to rob. It didn't take long for him to find his target. He heard music blaring in the darkness and rode his bike in that direction to break into that house. Once inside, he found his first victim, 23-year-old Bai, no first name given, deep asleep while the music played. Known as Little White Shoes to her friends and family, she worked at a nearby zinc factory and was known to be a beautiful and kind woman who was loved by everyone that knew her. As he rummaged through her room, Bai woke up and Gao struggled to silence her in the most brutal way possible. He had strangled her to the point of breaking her neck, then proceeded to stab her 26 times and slashed her throat. And while Gao did not sexually assault her, it was clear that he considered it when investigators found bloody handprints staining the inside of the victim's thighs. After the vicious murder, he sat on her bed, flipping through a photo album, staring at Bai's photos for hours before he burnt them. Gao didn't intend to stay there all night to admire his handiwork. He had to go back home to his pregnant wife, who was due to give birth to their firstborn son at any time. His urge to kill had only been temporarily satiated. 6 years later, he felt that urge again. On July 27, 1994, he murdered 19-year-old Shi Mao in her factory dormitory. The pair both worked at Baiyin City Power Supply. He was moving from one floor to another when he saw Shi Mao in the cafeteria mopping. She had gone outside to pour out dirty mop water, and when she returned, she saw footprints on the floor and allegedly asked Gao if he had stolen anything. Gao was angered at her accusation and decided to kill her. The next morning, Shi's body was found, her throat was slashed, and she had been stabbed 36 times. He murdered his third victim on March 28, 1997 in Batao, Inner Mongolia, but the details of that murder was never revealed. It had been 10 years between his first and fourth murder, and the gap between murders were getting shorter. In 1998, Gao Chenyoung began to escalate in both frequency and viciousness, murdering 4 people that year. On January 13, 1998, he murdered his fourth victim, Yang, in her Bayan City home. He savagely sexually assaulted her, stabbed her 16 times, then proceeded to cut off her ears, as well as removed a 5 by 9 inch portion of flesh from the top of her head. The brutality of Yang's murder struck fear in the residents of Bayan City, who worried that they or their loved ones could be next. From this murder, Gao established a method for his killings. All of his victims suffered from sexual assault, multiple stab wounds, and the removal of body parts. He killed his fifth victim just 3 days later inside of her home. She was found stabbed 8 times and was missing part of her left breast and an 11 by 9 portion of flesh. Not even the young were spared from his attacks. On July 30th, 1998, he killed his youngest victim, who was only 8 years old. She was the daughter of co-worker Mao Zhang at Bayan Power Supply. He saw Zhang's daughter at the factory dormitory. While we don't know exactly what happened, it is possible that given the poverty of the area, the 8-year-old was left home alone while her mother went to work. Zhang's daughter had been found later that day in the closet. She had been strangled, the belt used to kill her still tied tightly around her neck, and she had been sexually assaulted. There was evidence that he made himself a cup of tea after he was done. The murders in Bayan City were like a terrifying urban legend. Parents told their children to come home before night. Women and girls were afraid to leave their homes without a male relative. There were rumors that the killer preferred beautiful, long-haired women wearing red. It was later revealed that those rumors were partially true. 4 months after the little girl's murder, factory worker Su Wei Mao Mao was found in a pool of blood in her home by her mother. Su Wei caught Gao's eyes as she walked home late that night from her late shift from a fluoride salt factory. As soon as she went inside her house, he forced himself in and attacked. Her body was found a few days later. He slashed her throat and stabbed her 22 times. Her breasts, hands, and genitals were all missing. In a later interview, Gao said that the murder of Su Wei Mao Mao took all of 5 minutes. The police were stumped. No one in her neighborhood heard or saw anything. The removal of body parts were so skilled that the police thought that a butcher or a surgeon might be the culprit. They were dealing with their own Jack the Ripper. Gao had another 2-year pause before he resumed killing 3 more women between the years 2000 and 2002. There was only one confirmed person that was able to escape Gao. During the 2001 Chinese New Year, Miss Xu in Bayan City was walking home late at night. What she didn't realize was that a predator noticed her and began to follow. As she stepped to her door, he grabbed her. Xu fiercely fought back, and she was able to get into her home and lock the door. Xu's husband heard her cries for help, and he ran to her aid. The presence of Xu's husband didn't scare Gao away. He stood outside staring into her window and smiling. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. After 2002, Gao Chenyoung simply stopped. For 14 years, he lived quietly and ran a store with his wife. All of his neighbors thought he was a quiet and polite shopkeep, unaware of the monster he truly was. No one knows why he stopped, and Gao never gave a reason. So we can only speculate that it was because he was getting older and unable to overpower young women, or familial responsibilities finally took priority. While Gao left plenty of evidence at the crime scenes, including fingerprints, footprints, and bodily fluids, much of it was destroyed or discarded by rookie cops during the first set of murders. Many of the victims' families and those who had knowledge of the case believed that the police were negligent while investigating. Leo Schumann, a former colleague of the first victim Bai, said that the police brought in detection dogs from Langzhou City, which is over 100 miles away, overnight to investigate. Leo said that the dogs didn't do much and they seemed to be overwhelmed and dizzy due to their overnight trip. One of the major things that Gansu police were criticized for was not releasing the many witness sketches of Gao Chenyoung because they did not want to cause a panic. Su Wei Chi-yangping, brother of Su Wei Mao Mao, said that his family wrote to officials in Beijing asking for help solving his sister's murder, but they never received a reply. He also said he visited the police regularly to get updates, but he wasn't given any information. In 2015, the Gansu police decided to restart the investigation. They tested DNA, reviewed over 200,000 sets of fingerprints by magnifying glass, and discovered that 9 of their cold case murders were connected. Despite this, they still didn't have a culprit. That was until they got a hit on a DNA sample. In 2016, Gao's uncle was arrested for bribery and a DNA sample was taken. At the time, China had just started taking DNA samples of all men and boys. The authorities said that DNA collection was necessary to combat the increase in violent crimes, particularly serial killings. Even the most minor crimes resulted in having a DNA sample taken. After reviewing family history, they were able to narrow down the suspects to Gao. They watched him for months before they were sure that Gao was the culprit. On August 26, 2016, Gao was arrested at his store inside of Bayan City Industrial School, much to the surprise of his wife, who watched her husband be taken away by a group of policemen. She had no idea that she was married to a serial killer. During the interrogation, Gao admitted to 11 murders. Detective Wang Yang described Gao as being so calm that it was terrifying. The detective said that Gao described the murders in great detail with a blank expression. Even when describing the most vicious details, he remained unemotional. He told the police that he threw away the body parts off a bridge and into the Yellow River on his way home. When asked why he killed, he answered that he felt anxious and flustered, and the only way to relieve that was to kill. Gao said that he randomly picked the women that he followed. He would rape the ones he thought beautiful and only kill the women he didn't. He said that the removal of organs was revenge for his victims resisting him. It took a year for Gao Chenyoung to go to trial. He was charged with murder, rape, robbery, and mutilation of a corpse. Because of the high-profile status of the case, prosecutors wanted to make certain that they didn't have any false positives. The trial lasted 2 days. He bowed 3 times in the traditional way to apologize to the families and bizarrely said that he would donate his organs. On March 30th, 2018, he was found guilty and said that he would not appeal the judge's decision. On January 3rd, 2019, with the approval of the Supreme People's Court, Gao Chenyoung was executed in Bayan City, Gansu Province, at the age of 54. Maury Travis was a serial killer that might have never been caught if it wasn't for his lack of knowledge of the internet. Born in Missouri in 1965, Travis was considered a quiet boy and a regular churchgoer. His life changed at college when he became addicted to cocaine and was arrested for armed robbery in 1994. He would be in and out of prison for the remainder of his life. When he was released for a final time in 2001, he started kidnapping women and keeping them in his basement for days, if not weeks at a time, before ultimately killing them. Travis chose prostitutes as his victims because they were least likely to be missed. After a profile piece was written about the death of Teresa Wilson, Travis sent an anonymous letter to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch listing the return address as I Thraldom in New York City with the stamp of an American flag upside down. In the letter, Travis praised the reporter for a well-written article and included a computer-generated map with an X indicating where another body could be found. The letter was immediately given to the police, and after searching, a skeleton was discovered. The police saw the website Expedia.com was printed at the bottom of the map. The St. Louis police, along with the FBI, contacted Expedia to find out if they had any logs of map searches that matched the map Travis gave them. The website was able to provide hundreds of IP addresses. With the help of the telecommunication company WorldCom, they were able to find Maury Travis and arrest him for 2 kidnappings and were able to link him to several murders around the state of Missouri. When the police searched his home, they found a secret torture dungeon in the basement. It was filled with bondage equipment, handcuffs, and a stun gun. Among the pile of evidence was a video titled Your Wedding Day that contained footage of Maury torturing and taunting his victims. He would make them call him master, berate, beat, and sexually assault them. The following audio is very hard to listen to and isn't for the faint of heart. Please go to the next chapter if you don't want to listen.
Can't hear you what you're saying. Say it clear.
You want the master that pleases me to serve you. You are the master that pleases me to serve you.
Stop for it.
You are the master that pleases me to serve you. Alright.
Now you sit your ass down like I said. You sorry?
Yes.
You sorry about what?
Everything.
Jumping in the car with a motherfucker you don't know? Huh?
Yes.
You sorry?
Yeah.
You want to say something to your kids?
Mama, sorry.
There were several other scenes on the tape, including the strangulation of one victim and other scenes so disturbing and vile that Police Chief Joe Makwa ordered psychological counseling for the officers that watched it. After his arrest, Travis claims to have killed 17 women, but authorities believe it can be as many as 20. Maury Travis would never stand trial for his horrible crimes. On June 22, 2002, Travis hung himself in his cell. The NFL is one of the most popular sport leagues in the United States. They have produced top-tier athletes, actors, politicians, and serial killers. Here are 2 football players turned serial killers. Randall Woodfield had dreams of making it big in the NFL. After he was let go by the Green Bay Packers in 1974, his life spiraled into the life of a serial killer. Woodfield was born on December 26, 1950 in Salem, Oregon, and was the 3rd child of a wealthy family. In middle school, he started showing signs of inappropriate sexual behavior and began exposing himself to girls. And in high school, he was known around town as a peeping Tom. His parents were so concerned by his behavior that they put him in therapy. Despite his behavior problems, he excelled in football, basketball, and track throughout high school. He attended Treasure Valley Community College, and his unusual habits escalated to violence when he ransacked his ex-girlfriend's apartment. He then transferred to Portland University, where he played football. His football skills got the attention of the NFL, and he was drafted by the Packers in 1974. But he didn't last long because he was kicked off the team a few months later due to over a dozen indecent exposure arrests. Unable to maintain his football career, Woodfield left Wisconsin and returned to Portland, Oregon. It was there that his first crime spree would begin. In 1975, 24-year-old Randall Woodfield began robbing women by knife point and forcing them to perform oral sex before stealing their purses. In order to catch him, the local police had female officers act as decoys, and he was caught on March 3rd of that year. He received a 10-year sentence for second-degree robbery and only served 4 of the 10-year sentence. A few months after his release from prison in 1979, he began his second crime spree, and this time it became deadly. While some people are rehabilitated or scared straight after serving time in prison, Woodfield doubled down. When he was released in July 1979, he reconnected with Sherry Ayers, a 29-year-old former classmate. The pair had known each other since the 2nd grade, and he wrote to her while he was in prison. Sometime after his release, he bumped into her and they discussed their high school's 10-year class reunion. We don't know exactly what happened, but we do know that he showed up at her apartment on October 9, 1980. Sherry was raped and murdered. He hit her on the head with an unknown object, then stabbed her in the neck repeatedly. Woodfield was a suspect immediately and was questioned by the police, but there wasn't any evidence that was directly tied to Woodfield, and he refused a polygraph test. The only clue that the police had to go by was a car that looked like Woodfield's was spotted leaving the scene of the crime. As a result, he wasn't arrested. A short month later, Woodfield's urge to kill returned, and his next target was 22-year-old Darcy Fix. And just like Sherry, Darcy wasn't a stranger. She was the ex-girlfriend of Woodfield's college friend, and he decided to attack her on Thanksgiving Day. What he didn't expect was 24-year-old Keith Altick to show up in the middle of the attack. He bound and gagged both Darcy and Keith and shot them execution style inside of her home. Woodfield was questioned because of his connection with the victim, and once again, there were no charges due to lack of evidence. Woodfield didn't just kill people he knew. He changed his tactics and started killing strangers. On December 9, 1980, he began wearing a fake beard and a nasal strip and started a series of robberies in Oregon. He committed armed robberies on gas stations, restaurants, and even an ice cream parlor. In some of the robberies, he would force female workers to either expose themselves or to pleasure him. By January 1981, the police were calling him the I-5 Bandit because of his predilection to commit his crimes at businesses near the highway. No one was safe from this one-man crime wave. On January 14th, he broke into the home with two sisters, ages 10 and 8. He made them disrobe and forced them to perform acts on him. A few days later, he broke into an office building and murdered Shari Hull and injured Beth Wilmot after sexually assaulting them. His reign of terror didn't stop in Oregon. By February, he was in California, often committing multiple crimes on the same day. On February 3, 1981, 37-year-old Donna Eckert and her 14-year-old daughter Janelle were found dead in their home in Mountain Gate, California, just off the I-5. The mother and daughter were found in the master bedroom in bed and shot multiple times in the head. Lab tests revealed that Janelle was sexually assaulted. The next day, Woodfield kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and robbed 3 women from 3 separate businesses. On February 9th, he robbed 2 more businesses, as well as sexually assaulted women at both locations. His last murder occurred on February 15th when he was 30 years old. He was back in Oregon, and once again, he went after someone he knew. He shot and killed his ex-girlfriend, 18-year-old Julie Ritz, inside of her home in Beaverton, Oregon. With the revelation that another woman that Woodfield knew was murdered, the police immediately made him the prime suspect. Although he was a suspect for the murder of Julie Ritz, the police didn't have him under surveillance, and he was able to commit 3 more robberies and a sexual assault before he was finally taken in for questioning. After his March 3rd interrogation for Julie's murder, his apartment was searched and he was put in a lineup and was chosen as the culprit time and time again by the women he attacked. One of the witnesses included Beth Wilmot, who survived being shot in the head. But as the investigation into Woodfield continued, Beaverton, Oregon police began to see a pattern. The crimes all occurred along the I-5 highway. The police then decided to check the phone records of payphones along the I-5. Police Chief David Bishop said, "Woodfield was addicted to the phone. He made thousands of calls. He had girlfriends everywhere." The phone records convinced the police that Woodfield was the suspect for a 5-month crime spree that took the lives of 18 people. Despite being directly linked to 18 murders, he was only charged for the murder of Shari Hull. During the trial, the district attorney for the county said that Woodfield was the coldest, most detached defendant I've ever seen. He was ultimately found guilty of Shari Hull's murder, the attempted murder of Beth Wilmot, and 2 counts of sodomy and received life in prison. Another 35 years were added to his sentence later that year when he was convicted of sodomy and weapons charges for his attack on another woman in a restaurant bathroom. By 1990, it was believed that Woodfield actually killed upwards of 44 people. But because the state of Oregon was unable to afford multiple trials, they were satisfied with Woodfield's life sentence. As of the making of this video, Randall Woodfield is 71 years old and is currently serving his sentence at the Oregon State Penitentiary.